All right, now it is time to hear from Dave Edwards and Helen Edwards, who are the founders of Artificiality. Natalie, are they with us?
Not
All right.
quite yet.
Okay. So while we're waiting for Dave and Helen to join us, and I can't quite see if they're there, so you just let me know as soon as they're ready to go. I want to give a
Yes.
little bit of background. Yeah? Good to go?
No, not yet. I'll give you a heads up shortly, Elise, once I see them.
Okay, thank you. So I want to give a little bit of background about why I invited Dave and Helen to come talk with us today. So Dave and Helen have been working in the area of artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence strategy and ethics for many years. I was first met them when working with a colleague who applies artificial intelligence to meeting ratings and looks at those ratings to then predict the outcomes of projects and whether or not an employee is about to leave the company and all kinds of things. Because as those of you who are focused on meetings here will know, the way that we behave in meetings and what we experience is a large part of what determines our employee experience with our companies. And as I was talking with my colleagues, they said, the people you need to know are Dave and Helen. They first collaborated with us on a course for our meeting school, which is on how to design strategy for incorporating AI into your company plans like 3 years ago. So way before the current wave of developments and the advent of OpenAI and GPT and all of those things. Today, they host the Artificiality podcast and the Artificiality newsletter, where you can see nearly daily updates on what the latest research shows and what we need to be considering as we think about how to incorporate AI into the workplace. They're also the authors of a book on decision making that looks at the key frames of decision making and how to apply those with your teams. So I'm hoping they're about ready to go. What do you
No,
know?
not quite, Elise. Sorry, we're still waiting on them. I have reached out to see if they're done in their tech check or if they're even there. Hopefully,
Okay.
they'll be back shortly.
So while we're waiting for them, does anybody want to pop off mute and ask a question about anything else?
Helen has just entered. In fact, they both are coming in now.
All right, all right, all right.
All right, just getting Helen to start her video up for us, and Dave as well.
Hey,
Hello.
we're so we're so glad to see you all. I've just given you a glowing introduction and recommendation. I think you're awesome. I'm super excited to hear what you have to share today and want everybody to subscribe to your newsletter and podcast because that is how I know what to pay attention to in AI versus what is frothy hype. So thank you so much for spending the time with us today, and we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. We will get going by sharing some slides. There we go. Good. Excellent. So, welcome. I'm Dave.
I'm Helen.
And we are Artificiality. We're excited to be talking to you about sort of one angle of way of thinking about our new world with intelligent machines. So starting off with a little bit just about us. We are coming to you from Bend, Oregon, so usually much closer to Elise than she is at the moment. And we approach this world from a perspective of what we call artificial philosophy and meta research, which we use to help people make sense of AI. So on Artificiality, you'll find a variety of articles and essays. We have a newsletter, podcast. We also have an in-depth research membership for leaders to figure out how to apply AI in their organizations. One thing that makes us distinctive is that we come at this from a variety of disciplines. We bring behavioral economics and cognitive science, especially complexity science. It's one of our core interests. And we blend all of these together in order to help us make sense of this new crazy world that we live in. Today, we're here to talk about the sort of contrast between collective intelligence and collective stupidity. We now are surrounded by these new AI tools, which have the word intelligence in them. And in a lot of ways, they can be considered intelligent. And using them as part of a group of people, our complex human system, can enhance and encourage and expand upon our collective intelligence by having more machines that are intelligent as part of that. But we also risk going down the path of collective stupidity. There's lots of ways that we as humans make mistakes. There's lots of ways that machines make mistakes, and machines also amplify the mistakes that we've made over history. They're one of these grand machines that take all kinds of good ideas and bad ideas and spread them everywhere. And when we rely too much on machines, or we rely inappropriately on machines, we can actually just, degrade our collective into more collective stupidity. So today we're going to talk a bit about generative AI itself. We're going to talk a bit about how we work together with those tools. We're going to run you through one example that we have of good ways of using these tools. There's a lot of sort of standard kind of mindset about how to use these tools. We're going to give you sort of some different perspectives. And we'll try and leave some time for questions at the end, have a conversation. Feel free, however, to drop any questions in the chat, in the Zoom chat, because we can monitor that and we'll try and address them in the moment if that's the right way to go. So generative AI, let's talk about the good and the bad, give you sort of our view of how to think about this new world of AI. The overall promise of what we have is models, foundation models, like things like GPT, which is the technology underneath OpenAI's ChatGPT, or large models like Claude and Gemini coming from Google. The premise here is that these tools have been able to absorb the entire data cosmos, everything that's been digitized in human history. And it's able to access all of that knowledge and little disparate ideas and bring them all together and create something truly novel for you. Every time you ask for something, it comes back and it is novel. And that's really powerful that you can access all of this knowledge all at once and do something interesting with it. Now, this world of generative AI is distinct from what we've considered traditional AI, what we now think of as traditional AI. In the world before, say, a year or two ago, all the AI that we used across social platforms and Google search or YouTube or any of those things was designed to predict a particular thing. What search result might you want? What video might you want to watch next? What product might you want? What are sales going to be next quarter? What product should I market to my customer? It was all targeting a bullseye. Generative AI, though, is fundamentally different. It's a creative explosion of ideas. There's no one particular thing it's aiming for. It's trying to give you something that's quite broad and interesting. And that's powerful, but it's important to understand the distinction. So ChatGPT can access immense amounts of data, but it isn't a replacement for Google, at least not yet. We do dig a lot into this new world of generative search and the work we do. If you're interested in that, take a look, send us a message, and we can point you towards some of that. But it's a really important thing. People conflate the idea that you can ask ChatGPT lots of things, but it isn't giving you the kinds of answers that you're used to going to Google for. Why is that? There's a couple reasons. One is that these things are fundamentally guessing machines. They're guessing what the next word might be, or in this kind of idea, like what the next panel of a painting might be. It's paid attention to, is one of the technical terms, all of the conversation you've had, and it's starting to write a sentence, and it's guessing at what those next words, technically tokens, but you can think of those words to complete the sentence or paragraph or project that you've worked on. Now, it's guessing at what sort of the best is. It's not actually aiming for the best, because if it came back with the best next word, it would sound really robotic. So one of the ways that these tools have been designed to make language more human, is that it is not quite the best word, which is one of the reasons why it has creative and why it has some errors involved. As I said before, every time you ask for it, you get something different. These are two screen grab videos of ChatGPT, the tool from OpenAI, asking the exact same prompt. So putting the prompt in, that's what you put in, and the response is what you get back, but the exact same prompt, one right after the other. Right. And they were exactly in sequence. And you can see that the answer, the prompt was write a blog post about how ChatGPT works. The answers are different, entirely different. They say sometimes different things. This is some of the power of generative AI, but it's also one of the risks of generative AI. You can't think that every time you get an answer, it is the answer, right? The way that we might think of when we go to, say, a dictionary or anything else. There's another aspect of these tools that's important. Remember, is they are fabricators. They're fabricating an answer, and mostly what they're doing is fabricating the answer based on what you've asked for. They're quite helpful. If you spend a lot of time with ChatGPT, it's always saying certainly and absolutely. It's really sort of frustratingly cheerful all the time, but it's fabricating things, which means it'll make stuff up in order to give you an answer at times. This is a great back and forth that Helen had with ChatGPT. Can you think of a word that begins with M that means emerging or developing or something like that? And it comes back with the word maturing. She says, anything that's more juvenile, like even before maturing. And it says nascent. She says, I hate to break it to you, but that begins with an N. Oh, my apologies. It always likes to apologize, by the way, for that oversight. And it suggests incipient. She says, now you're having me on. That begins with an I. Maybe you should just say, I don't know. Right? This is a pretty often kind of back and forth you can have with these tools. It'll miss things like that. But it's trying to give you an answer. Here's another great set of screenshots from a variety of generative AI tools, from ChatGPT, from Microsoft's Bing, from Claude, which is from Anthropic. We also have Bard from Google asking the same question. When was the earliest mention of artificial intelligence in the New York Times? And they all come back with different answers. They're close, but they're not the same. And that's something where there is actually a fact that could be found, right? There is a date where that word originated, but they're coming back with a variety of different answers, and some of them are really quite all over the place. These things can also be fabricated to create all kinds of images, or used to fabricate images. These are great, and they're topical this year as we worry about what the effect of generative AI might be on elections around the world. Now we have here on the left, Nancy Pelosi and Ted Cruz having a nice big hug and smiling at each other, something I wonder whether actually could ever have happened. And there's Taylor Swift and Elon Musk next to the Golden Gate Bridge. It's maybe a little bit more plausible, but I'm still not sure I believe it. But either way, these look real, and they're not really, it didn't take any time to create them, really. They just pop out. We've done all kinds of things. Your politicians participating in protests. You can see how these things can be used, and they can be quite believable. There's a big story a couple of weeks ago how somebody created a fake video of Taylor Swift promoting Le Creuset, and suddenly everybody was, I guess, buying cookware, based on her recommendation, and it was a complete fabrication. So generative AI can create incredible things, right? It can do all kinds of stuff, but you can't count on it to create anything accurate or truthful. It is guessing the next thing. It is creating something just because you asked it to. And it doesn't have any sense of truth. There's no one set of facts it can go look up and count and check. Most of these tools are weighted towards more factually accurate things like Wikipedia, but Wikipedia has errors, and there's lots of other sources of information that it's looked across the world and find conflicting ideas. Just think if you basically went through and looked at the digital record of everyone in the United States, how many subjects would you find quite varying ideas of what truth actually is? And that these models don't have any way of assessing which of those truths that are being established by each individual, because they do see them as their truths, which of those truths is actually a global truth. So we have a research obsession. We recently put out our 10 research obsessions for our Artificiality Pro research membership. And one of the core ones is trust. We think that in order for AI to be truly useful, to be able to use it in your daily life, to be able to accomplish tasks at work or at home, to be able to create new things with it, you have to know if and when to trust it. We have lots of ways that we teach people to use these tools where accuracy and truth don't really matter. It's more about, we'll show you, and Helen will walk through the exercise of exploring and other things. Sometimes truth is really important, sometimes not. But we have to know when we can trust it and say, aha, this is a time that actually truth matters and I can. And so we get into this, and there's great research. We'll be writing some more about this, hoping to put out some more just in the next few days. One great source of research was an academic paper evaluating these generative AI search tools. So these are tools that present information and then they provide citations. We've all gone through this, right? You go through school, you read documents or books that have footnotes. And those footnotes tell you where that source came from, so you could go look it up and make sure that the author didn't get it wrong. These tools also provide those kinds of footnotes, but here's what's fascinating. They looked at several different tools, four different tools: Bing Chat, Neva AI, which shut down recently, Perplexity, and UChat. This was a year ago, but still quite relevant. They found that just more than half of sentences were fully supported with citations. So they're supposed to be these reliable research-oriented tools, but only half of the sentences were supported. What's even more surprising is only 3/4 of the citations actually supported the sentence that they referred to. So that means an entire 25% of citations had nothing to do with the sentence, or at least only partially something to do.
Question from Elise, which is perfect to answer now.
You're seeing for accuracy improvement. Ooh, we are seeing some level of research coming out that's talking about accuracy improvement. I'm in the middle of writing something up, and if I'm productive today, you might see it tomorrow, Elise. But we are seeing some improvement. But challenge here is that there's always a lag in the research to actually see it. There's a lot of hype around, or excitement around Perplexity in particular. I've, in my own sort of anecdotal work, because we haven't done this in a comprehensive research way, but in anecdotal evidence, Perplexity is sometimes good with things that are actually quite known and established, and other times it's off base completely. I went back and I went through a process of working with Perplexity to try and ask query about our former company. We had a market research company in AI called Intelligentsia, which we sold to Atlantic Media a few years ago. And I asked about it, what happened to it? And it started off with talking about us. And then it went off and talking about other people and other ideas and completely different things, all having citations to things that actually didn't connect to any of the answers. So anecdotally, it feels like something that is well known. Could be you're having a higher level of accuracy, but the problem is we don't know where the line is. Where is there the thing that I'm looking for where it's going to be accurate versus the thing I'm looking for that it won't? Good question from Curtis, which is Waldo. We're just starting to use Waldo. So far, I'm liking so Waldo is a research tool designed for market researchers, and you find it at waldo.ai. We started using it, honestly, because we just had an interview with a venture capitalist who backed it on our podcast. And what I do like about that is the interface is quite friendly in that you can hover over the citations and you can see a bit of the source. And it's referring to, so far what I'm finding is it's referring to things that are much closer to the target. We're still working through, honestly, a lot of the investigations of creating research with it and then digging into to affirm whether it's accurate. But so far, I'm liking that idea.
And Mark also made an important point. The accuracy does depend a lot on the subject. But another thing that happens with these hallucinations and fabrications is the problem is they're just so unpredictable. There's a lot of evidence that says that small changes can make big differences to the way the model performs. Silly changes like that whether you have a colon or spaces between your contexts. There was something amusing I saw this morning where Kit Kat in Canada has just launched an ad campaign because a Google paper came out with a prompt that said, have a break, resulted in better search accuracy. So if you go on X or Twitter, whatever you're supposed to call it these days, X, and have a look at and find this Kit Kat ad from Canada, it's hilarious. They've literally taken the Google paper and compared it with accuracy and basically saying, well, if it's good enough for an AI to take a break and have a Kit Kat, maybe you should. And it's quite a clever ad. But it just shows you how these small changes. There's another new paper out about butterfly effects, which basically mean very small changes at the start, very small differences at the start of your prompting journey can result in forcing and going to different places in the model in quite unpredictable ways. So this is still very early days. Anyone that tells you that hallucination is a solved problem, it just needs to be rolled out, is just smoking something.
Well, and
it's a more complex story, because there's always this trade-off, right? We want the creativity and the exploration through the model to deliver us something novel. So we actually have to deal with the fact that the flip side is that you kind of make up a bit. This, by the way, this is what humans do, as you guys probably all well aware, if we there's always this trade-off between the exploration and the evolutionary space versus and noise, which is this randomness that allows us to find these new spaces in a complex problem, and having predictable, reliable, be in the same space in the data landscape.
It's good to understand a little bit of contrast too. So I mentioned before Intelligentsia. We sold that to a publication and worked in the journalism business for a couple of years. And in that process, there's fact checkers that look at everything you write to make sure. And they look at things like, well, that statistic, can I go find a reliable source for that statistic? There's still plenty of errors. I look back over just the last week of corrections in the New York Times, and there's a handful of corrections every day. Despite the rigorous editorial process at a paper like the New York Times, we are always going to be surrounded by some amount of error, because that's just the reality. The difference is an editor and a fact checker will say, aha, I want to go check that number against a government database that I know has been rigorously fact checked at its source. The models don't know where the data comes from in their data space. It can't say, I'm going to go find the most reliable source in my huge data universe. It's looking for the highest probability answer. Sometimes that highest probability is also what is most factually accurate. Sometimes it's just the thing that has risen through the noise. So a lot of this in context is to think a lot about how these machines operate in our universe. We think about the collective that we're living in, and it's a big change. Over the years, we've used technology to communicate, right? And I love the premise that Marshall McLuhan started with in the 1960s, as when he wrote about the medium as the message. And his idea was that as we created new technologies to communicate, the new media that were formed by those technologies altered the message that we were communicating. So we went from long-form books to very short-form telegrams to audio-only radio to entertainment-oriented TV. Neil Postman built on McLuhan and talked about the changes as we moved into the internet space. All of those things are real and true, and it's proved out that the medium is the message. It's fundamentally different. Our news is all entertainment-based now because of the change of moving news into television. This is really different, though, because this new technology is actually meaning that the medium is creating the message for the very first time. Prior to this, every other media was communicating what we humans wrote or produced, or the stories we told, and it would shape those stories in a fundamental way, but it never created the message. That's important in terms of the creation, but also the reception, because we have this thing called automation bias, where we actually believe the machine more because it's the machine. And over the last 40 years of using personal computers, yesterday was the 40th anniversary of the Macintosh, so we'll use that as a good number. We've become used to machines being accurate. You tell it to do something and it does it. And if it doesn't do the right thing, you send it back to the software engineers to fix the bug. But now we have this new world of machines which are designed to be unpredictable. And that's a mind shift change that takes a while to get to. And one of the biggest risks we have for collective stupidity is actually just not enough people understanding how these things work well enough to be able to understand the difference. this sort of transition over time helps us understand a little bit about where we get knowledge, how we learn. If you think back sometime, a period of time, I sort of think at the beginning of the internet as we connected everyone, we were still gathering information and learning from a small number of hubs, major websites that actually brought things together with these sort of editorial fact checkers. We were all going to visit something that was a publisher's site to get knowledge and to learn from. In the middle is kind of the social era where everybody got to publish. And so we got to learn from the many. Anybody could put their ideas up, and sometimes they would go viral, and sometimes they were correct, and sometimes they were crazy. Now we have this new world of thinking that we're connecting to not just people, but also machines. And that has a very different answer in terms of where we get our information, how we discover new ideas, and who we learn from and who's learning from us. Remember, the machines are learning from all of the content that the many generated, right? And it may prioritize, they may shape some of the knowledge in the machine based on the source, but this is an entirely new world that we don't really understand yet.
So let's have a talk about what the data is telling us about how people work with these tools. One of the core, it doesn't work like that. One of the core pieces of research that came out in 2023 was a BCG and Harvard study around efficiency use and productivity with ChatGPT and GPT-4. Now, this was a well-designed, good study. It's quite a complicated design, but there are a few really important things that came out of this study that have tended to be quite long-standing and quite indicative, being repeated in a lot of different contexts. And the first one is this idea of eliminating the proficiency gap. And you can see here on this chart that without GPT-4 had low performers versus high performers. And then when you add GPT-4, the low performers actually have a significant proficiency bump, bigger than the high performers do. And even to the point where statistically significantly, they were performing higher than the high performers with GPT-4. Now, this is on a creative ideation task. And that's really one of the things to sort of understand about when you see data on these proficiency studies, is it's an important thing to grapple with what actually the scope of the test is. Now, so one of the things that we see is that if people are, and we've seen this reproduced a lot, if people are new to something, they're novice, they're trying to learn, they're trying to grapple with the initial concepts, they get this big performance boost with a language model. But there is a subtlety here that on creative product innovation, this is a big change and a big impact. But on problem solving, it's actually a big decrease. So the question is, and with low performers, the impact is high. So the question is, what's really going on here? And what's really going on here is that there are certain things that these models are particularly good at helping us do, and there are certain things that they're actually not particularly good at helping us do if we're not an expert in that area. Now, the problem-solving test was a different kind of test. It was much more complex. It was much more reflective of a real-world situation that consultants have to do, and it was designed with an inbuilt error. And the low performers, minus 26%, so degrading their performance, the low performers didn't spot this error, and most of the high performers didn't either. Now, this is a pretty strong measure of what we see here around a new kind of automation bias. As you work with these models, you're more prone to accept the answers from them. And if you're an expert in the area, you're more prone, you're going to spot them. But as soon as you're in quite a complex environment, you're far more prone to make errors. So this is the first seed of collective stupidity, where if you give complex or more difficult real-world problems to a group of people, low performers will not spot errors. High performers have a better chance, but not always. And there's even more subtlety starting to roll out in this area. If you change the context and define low performers as people who are struggling and are more and they're not novices or new or unskilled, they're actually struggling, this effect is far more pronounced. So these are not silver bullets. These are places where the collective intelligence of the entire community of human machines actually matters a lot. One other point that came from the study that's really important for collective intelligence versus stupidity is, although on these combinatorial creative tasks, you're able to get a big individual creative boost, the collective is actually getting a ding, is declining. Now, why is this? Well, it's because we all end up going to the same space in that sort of answer landscape, if you like, in the solution landscape. If everyone's using the same model, asking the same sort of questions, you get a little bit of variation because of hallucinations, because of fabrication, but you don't get a lot. So the diversity of humans matters an enormous amount because there just isn't enough diversity ultimately in the training data. We're all kind of using the same training data with these models, but there's just not enough diversity in these models. So it's really important for understanding that. Now, if you've got ChatGPT or any of these things open at the moment, you might want to try this as on your phone or on your computer. Ask this prompt. See how many creative combinations for a new cookie for millennials who care about sustainability can you come up with in 60 seconds? Now, we're getting sort of tight on time here, so we don't really have 60 seconds to spare. But if you can imagine doing this yourself, right, it's very hard to come up with this. And this is what this creative combination is about. It takes, when we've run this experiment, people come up with 5 or 6 in a minute max. ChatGPT, we stopped counting a lot. But you can see ours. You run this, and in 5 seconds, you get these ideas. In another 5 seconds, you can get some images. In another 5 seconds, you can get some creative packaging examples. Now, this is great, right? This shows you that creative, where the novice gets this huge uptick, that comes from these creative explorations. These are judged as creative. Chocolate chip avocado, yum, fantastic, can't wait to have one. So that counts as me, the not cookie person, being able to be really creative. But of course, the question is, how good are these really anyway? And that's the judgment that isn't in these studies. If you take that judgment to the next step and say, well, what do we know about how successful this cookie could be? And what do we know about the problems and the opportunity and what it really takes to get it to market? That's the disconnect between those two numbers, right? So that creative combination, huge, huge strength. But for the actual judgment and the solving of these problems, the bringing them to the actual true, beyond just ideation to actual solution development, that is a place where you have to change your strategy for working with these tools. Now, what we think about is a generalized way of using these tools that's a little bit more tactical, but very grounded in what it is that we do every day in the workplace. And Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, this is such a perfect quote from him. An organization is a factory that manufactures judgments and decisions. And now, of course, we are doing that so much more with machines. It was complicated enough getting it right with just humans. But now with these machines that make mistakes in similar kind of ways or make mistakes in highly alien ways, but are creative in alien ways, this judgment piece is just so much more important. So we took our book, Make Better Decisions, which is it has 50 nudges from these scholars around behavioral science and coaching and facilitation, all these sort of human things. And we combine it with these tools to say, well, how do you best combine get better at making these decisions, get better at the human product of a decision, a judgment, and action, and using these tools. We have a framework of 7 ways of thinking about it. Explore, which is accessing all the digitized human knowledge. Segmenting, being able to break up tasks to make them more achievable. Weaving, wow, this thing is incredible. These tools are incredible at combinatorial power. To me, this is one of the huge opportunities for education, because it's so much easier to take a hard concept and apply it in a way that you truly understand it. Creating, we're going to see an explosion in the ability to create things you've never been able to create before. Look what I did before. I made some packaging in 15 seconds. Now, it's kind of awful, but it's certainly beyond what I could have done before. Iterating, getting that critique and iteration to improve outputs. That's the real advanced skill in using large language models in particular. How can you use it to help you to go back and forth between the tool where you don't really even know that you're doing that? You're so in flow. Fusing, the synthesis of complex information. People talk a lot about summarizing as a core skill. It's not summarizing that's a core skill. When it comes to decision making, it's synthesis. Summarizing is just rolling up what we already know. Synthesis is creating new insights from complex and conflicting information. And reflection. Using these tools as coaches and as metacognitive support systems is enormously, the data is showing how much this is actually a really big part. I'm going to take you through just one, which is explore, and accessing all this digitized human knowledge. Really gloms onto that BCG research, because it says, what does it mean to go and find new stuff out there? Well, the thing about explore is that it really does democratize this vast knowledge that was just so siloed or limited. And in organizations as well, being able to explore across different data sets. It starts to help you tap into the synthesis. It allows this deeper research. It helps find rare, hidden, or tangential knowledge. This is really important in the enterprise, but also in scientific discovery. We're finding what's called sleeping beauties. Scientific papers that have sat for 20 years because no one even knew how to read them, but have already causal explanations and theories and hypotheses for things that are newly being discovered. And here's the thing that really it sort of matters with exploring and with making decisions, is there's always this trade-off between open-ended learning and focused analysis, with the ability to sort of settle down and take pragmatic action. We borrow a nudge from computer science, which is the explore, exploit trade-off. And this happens in nature as well. You know, you've always got to face every single decision, every single choice you make, especially as you use these tools. Should I go and do something new and find new data, or should I use just what I already know? And resolving this dilemma is actually quite tricky. Nature does it by giving us a childhood. You know, our parents look after us and take care while we go and collect data, AKA make a mess. And whereas exploit is, when do you know to settle down and make a decision? Now, we use these tools all the time to try and help us actually grapple with this decision in more complex environments around, should I go and do more analysis? Do I need to go and interview more people? These tools are actually really quite helpful. So, for example, here's some examples of explore versus exploit prompts. Explore prompts help me brainstorm creative ideas for new products or services I can offer my customers, and go out and consider emerging trends and underserved needs. Versus, based on my goal of maximizing profit, recommend how I should allocate my engineering team's time next quarter between new features and technical debt. So you can go backwards and forwards between these two, balancing these two, separating your thought process and your team's thought process, and facilitating people to understand that there's this really big difference between using these tools to go out for broad ideation, which we know will take you to a really next level, because you're able to access all this expert knowledge and link these things together in ways you've never been able to, versus coming down and exploiting. Now, this is sort of like divergent, convergent thinking and design thinking. But the real joy of using these tools is you can take it into places in the models that you just have no expert knowledge in. We've used this in workshops where people they're going into a new sort of area, something like trying to understand how to make a build-buy trade-off with a SaaS app, for example, and allowing them to use the models. They can use the models to go backwards and forwards between exploring different kinds of decision criteria for SaaS apps and then coming through and having this focused, optimized decision based on specific parameters that they found. So the point of this is that this is one little layer where you can use these tools really effectively to help people exploit on this dimension. Not sure if we've got time to run through this one.
We'll run through this just to give you an idea of how we think about it, but there's a time limitation to actually enjoy. But if you have ChatGPT, this would be, you can along with us here. I've been muted and unmuted. Here I am back again. Here we go. So hands off. The way we work through each of these frameworks as we work with people on this is we set up a scenario, and then we have a step-by-step process so you can actually work through and actually experience the journey. And we do this in a way that is using mock problems and ideas rather than somebody's individual corporate work. That's one of the biggest challenges, obviously, is how do you train a workforce to use these tools when you don't want to allow them to use it on actual work data, right? And so we're working with sort of a limited ability to work with the tools today. But we set up this scenario for Explore versus Exploit. You're a marketing manager launching a new beverage. You need to decide which customer segments and channels to focus your limited marketing budget on to get the highest return. And so we walk through an Explore and then an Exploit. So we start with exploring. Prompt the LLM, large language model, that's the name for things like ChatGPT, to suggest a wide range of potential target customer markets and marketing channels for your new product. Try to generate as many creative options as possible. And you can see a prompt example. I'm looking to launch a new beverage product. You're giving it context. I'm a marketing manager, global beverage company. I'm launching a new beverage company. Please give me a list of potential target customer markets and marketing channels. You could refine that. You could say, in these particular market segments, this kind of beverage, the better you get to one of the core ways we think about this is good, better, and best prompting. Good is good. This is good. Better gets longer and a bit more rich, giving more context to the model. Best is very detailed in terms of what you're giving it and what you're getting out of it. And that helps the model find its way through the data cosmos to find the best, most likely answer for you. So you go through that and you're exploring. And this is great because you can explore with a model like this. Then you can say, great, I have to allocate a $100,000 budget across top segments. And so you can say, here, give me 3 scenarios of how to spend my budget. This is great. It's read tons of marketing, plans that are out on the internet. Before using this tool, you'd Google them and you'd go look at a whole bunch of them and you try and find access and you see which ones are free or not, et cetera. And then you go through and you try and do the same kind of thing. And then you can bring it back and say, great, now let's actually look at what the answers are here. We bring people together to have this sort of conversation about the pros and cons of what this kind of output looks like. And what you'll find is things like this, right? So you have, sorry, that's not the right answer. So we do end up with these questions around the pros and cons of what you see out of it. And what you will find is that the model is great at exploiting because it can go access this huge data cosmos and bring back new and great ideas. The reliability part still comes through though, right? So great, give me some ideas. Doesn't really matter whether those are accurate ideas or not. Help me allocate my $100,000 budget. I'd warn you to just make sure you do the math and you add it up. All right. We went through one example. We were working with a college and working with faculty on getting them skilled up on how to use these tools. And one of the examples was helping students break down a problem and schedule my work plan. I have a paper due in 3 weeks. Can you give me a day-by-day plan to actually get this done? And it was very detailed and worked through the subject matter really well, and everything was really great. And then there was a math professor in the audience who raised her hand and said, you said 3 weeks. Yeah. There's 28 days on that plan. That's not 3 weeks. And it actually took until the moment of presenting it for us to go, whoops, yep, forgot to fact check it. Like, so even where we do this all the time, you can still just sort of have that automation bias that, well, it must be calculating, because how hard is it to plan out 3 weeks? But you still always have to be looking for those kinds of things. So last thing, as I mentioned, good, better, best prompting. These are the kinds of ideas that we work through with good, better, best. So a good is, tell me about the basics of rocket propulsion and space flight. Better adds things like compare and contrast liquid fuel and solid rockets. What are pros and cons? Best could be going deeper into include concepts like specific impulse, staging, and delta V budgets. Use examples to illustrate key points. You can get, as you get more refined with each one of them, it gets better. Good prompts can be good for lots of things. There's no reason that you have to go to these kinds of long, in-depth prompts, but it is definitely helpful.
Great question. We'll come to after that. We've got one more slide on the research.
This one?
No.
Which one?
The last one.
Yes, last one. Last one is here. Let's go. All right. World of workflows. Would you like to talk about this?
So this is one of our research obsessions. There's a lot going on in the space. It's changing a lot. Everyone's kind of fascinated with it. We've been studying the impact of AI on workers for the last 10 years, so we've got a pretty good sense of it. But we're constantly surprised about some of the new data coming through. It's great. It's a really interesting year this year. We think about this on a simple 2x2. We're looking at the task skill. Do you or the team need high or low task skill, a level of skill to achieve the task, and the worker productivity, a proficiency. Are you a highly proficient expert or just learning? And if the skill requires a lot of if the task requires a lot of skill and you're using these tools and you've got a lot of proficiency yourself, it's amplifying you. The ChatGPT is an amplifier. If the task is high, but your proficiency is low, you're bootstrapping. It's like me learning to code. I'm bootstrapping as I go. I'm making lots of mistakes. I sort of don't even know what I'm doing, but I'm kind of getting there, and I'm actually starting to pull some of it off. It's sort of literally pulling me through. If the task skill low, and your proficiency is high, it's time saver. It's me using ChatGPT as an editor because I write a lot. And in terms of low, it's a prosthetic. It's me using ChatGPT to write social media posts, for example, or to help do quick updates and quick summarization. So that's sort of our general overarching framework of using these tools. Got a couple of questions.
I'll address one from Matt, and he asked whether we agree that you can view AI as a genius but quirky. I'd say yes, but I'd say an unpredictable genius. I feel like using generative AI is like somebody just walked into your office and said, "I'm a genius." And you're like, okay. The question is, what are you actually a genius about and what are you not? And so that's the key question. It can be a genius, and it's certainly quirky, but sometimes it's really not a genius at all.
Yeah, I like to think of it as a great research assistant. And another question here, and before
we get the hook, I can see Elise pulling out the hook.
In your trainings with clients, how have you seen teams integrate and socialize the AI response findings? Do teams use the tool as a group? Is one person running prompts and bringing back the results to others and other approaches? That's an awesome question. The answer is it really depends on the team, and it depends on the goal of the team. The hardest thing is getting people's head out of their screen. Surprise, surprise. The most successful model that we've seen is that the senior person in the team, in the group, sorry to say, the hierarchy matters here. The senior person in the group is incredibly curious, incredibly communicating, loves to share what's on their screen, loves to share what ChatGPT said. It has a sense of humor about it and actually sets the tone for everyone to step in and say, well, I said, well, what do you think of that? It's the emotional leader in the group is the one who sets the tone and does that. That's been the most successful. If that's not possible as a facilitator, you literally have to force it. It's one of those, okay, close your computer and tell me if you can remember what ChatGPT said to you. You have to be a lot more active in pulling people out of their screens.
And that brings people to taps into the collective intelligence of the humans in the room to communicate and share. If that happens, it works. If not, yeah, it's really unpredictable.
Yeah, and it can be quite a lonely facilitation experience when you're going, just stop looking at your screen.
I know we're at time, Elise.
Yeah, and
We can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right, great. So speaking of, thank you so much. This has been great overview to get a sense of how to think about these things, how to consider them to be trustworthy and or not trustworthy allies in our decision making and our teaming. And speaking of getting into our screens and playing with AI, we're gonna do that exactly next.